Okay, just a quick introduction here about communication theory with some details. So let's discuss terminology first of all. Intrapersonal communication. That would just be communication within yourself. Then you have interpersonal communication. That's communication between exactly two people, dyadic. Small group communication would be next. That's going to be defined as a minimum of 3 all the way to 12 or 15. Some flexibility with the number there depending on location and what's going on at the location. Okay, so public communication. This means from one person to many. And then finally, mass media communication. Mass media communication, this is what becomes necessary when the speaker can no longer concentrate on expressing his ideas over expressing his ability to shout over the crowd or to overcome the audience or whatever the obstacle is there. And so some sort of technical reinforcement becomes necessary for that. What happens is you blend back into the group. One of the ideas behind using a model was that we might demonstrate the flow of communication. So there are primarily 3 models of communication that I like to talk about. There are many more, but there are 3 that I consider to be most important. And the first one would be Aristotle's very basic model, which is source, message, receiver. 3 components. This may sound familiar to you if you've had a communication course of any kind in your career. Next, we move on to Harold Lasswell from 1948, and this was initially designed for advertisers. I have another method that we'll get into later this semester that was initially designed for advertisers, and they tend to be more interesting and fun and more of an exciting approach, and so maybe I prefer them for that reason. But with the Lasswell model, now instead of the 3 components that Aristotle had, we now have 5. So we have who said what, to whom, on what channel, and with what effect or to what outcome. That's the Harold Lasswell model. So he's really wanting to try and determine the effects there, right? What is going on at every step? He's starting to quantify and break things down. Shannon Weaver, 1 year later in 1949, takes this a step further, or a few steps further, when she produces, well, she called it the mathematical model or the mathematical theory, but it became known as the Shannon-Weaver model. So 1949, in addition to Lasswell's criteria, Shannon-Weaver has information source, transmitter, signal, noise source. That's the important distinction here, is we're talking about interference with the message, that disruption of feedback. After noise, signal, then on to receiver, and then destination, and then feedback to information or source. And so those are 3 models of communication. When we talk about noise, for our purposes, we'll generally be in one of 2 categories. We'll either be in the physical, external, outside noise, such as hearing problems would prevent you from achieving, and then there's a psychological or internal limiting, being cognitively preoccupied with something else. Perhaps you have a contempt for the speaker. You could look at politics now. There's no middle of the road anymore. So if you find someone who's on one side, they're probably going to display some level of contempt for the other side, whether they intend to or not. And so I've adapted them with my own approach. And so what I would like for us to use as a model of communication going forward is the following. And I break mine down into 3 simple categories, just like Aristotle. So what I want is, I want the movement of ideas from point to point. That's what communication is. That's how you will define it. The movement of ideas from point to point. You may have heard this, the movement of messages or the transfer of information from source to destination or something along these lines. I much prefer to use the term idea rather than message or information, because that's what message or information is designed to produce within you, right? That's the whole point of communication, is when we're talking about intrapersonal especially. I have an idea and I want to convey that to you. So the goal is that I need to figure out how I can best describe and convey what's here so that I can put it in your head and have it resemble as closely as possible what's in mine. So, for example, if I said, everyone think of a dog right now. Go ahead, think of a dog. Got it? Now, if it were possible to take a slide out of everyone's brain to look at an image of the dog you all imagined, would they look the same? Probably not, unless it was a great coincidence. Some of you thought of an old dog, and some thought of puppies, and some thought of a mean dog, or etc. They're all different. But if I communicate more detail, more information to you, try it again. Everyone think of a dog. Think of a big dog. Big black dog. Big black dog asleep. Big black dog asleep on the couch. Big black dog asleep on the couch and lazy, for example. Okay, you see what I did there? If we were to take that slide out of everyone's head now and look at them, they would look very similar. And the difference is, obviously, I just gave you more detail. I conveyed it. I knew how to convey it to you, and I did it in such a way that I didn't burden you with unnecessary information, and I gave you just enough, hopefully, to be able to color in that image so that it would be similar to everyone else's. All right, so the movement of ideas from point to point. So my model is almost the same as Aristotle's, but instead of source, message, destination, I am source, idea, destination. So I'm just using that word. And there are reasons for that, and they're not important right now. We'll go into them later. But the movement of ideas from point to point. And I think from there, we may as well discuss the whole point of defining it this way. Why do we care about ideas, or what are they? And ideas are nothing more than mental representations. They're psychological constructs. We don't always know the genesis of our ideas. They come from abstract places. So an idea is an abstraction. It's a psychological representation. Well, why should we care about them? Or why do they matter? Well, as you well know, we can't know everything that there is to know. But we must be able to operate in the world. So in the cases where we can't know things, and we'll talk about this later, that's the field of epistemology, then we have no choice but to believe things. And so what informs our beliefs? Well, nothing more than the ideas we already have about the world. So notice how quickly ideas became important there. Once you consider that they have to inform your beliefs, where you are in a situation where you can't know, now there's a sense of urgency there. You want to make sure that they're right. And why is that? Why do these beliefs even matter? Because they have consequences. Your beliefs and your subsequent decisions that you make based on them will have consequences. Not all of them. Many will be trivial. The phone rings. Which hand will you answer it with, left or right? Doesn't matter. There are all kinds of things that you can look at that would be trivial, but there are other beliefs that have big consequences. For example, which religion you have anchored your ideology in. That would be extremely important, especially to the individual. There's a big difference between, they're not all, it's not like this cereal aisle where they're just a different version of sugar. there are some important distinctions in religion that will translate into a person's life because they tend to embody any religion that way. So beliefs have consequences. Now, why do we care about any of this? Again, because we would like to get at, as best as possible, what is true. And since it is not possible to know everything that's true, we're going to be forced to make decisions about what to believe. And for as long as we're forced to make decisions about what to believe, we had better be certain that we are well informed about the ideas that we have about the world, because that's where it begins, is our ideas about the world. So the better we are at communicating those to each other, the better we're going to be at reducing the amount of error and negative feedback that contributes to our faulty beliefs. All right. I think that's enough for one afternoon. So why don't we call it a day? This has been a lot of fun, and I will catch up with you on the next one.